and welcome to the fourth episode of the Perspective Shift podcast. We thought that today would be a good idea to talk about how to make growth more sustainable and more consistent in your life, and what could you start implementing in your own life to make sure that you're going in the direction that you want to go to, and what are the steps that you can implement to do that. So what I've noticed for me, for example, that has worked so far really well is to have a list of whys. Nietzsche said that he who has why can bear anyhow. And when I first heard that statement, kind of lit a fire inside of me that I started looking for my list of whys. Why am I doing this? Where do I want to go with my life? What kind of person do I want to become? And always asking the reason, or asking the question, why?
I would say that I think the whys are not something that might be really clear to you in the beginning. You know, like your intentions can change, and in the beginning of your self-improvement journey, maybe you're not even sure what your intentions are. And answering the question why is basically asking yourself, what is my intention in doing this? What do I want out of this thing that I'm trying to do? So an example from my life is just like when I started going to the gym, my intention was just that it was really external, that I wanted to have a better body so that people would look at me more and I would have more confidence, you know. And with time, after half a year of working out, my intention started to shift to be more intrinsic, that I want to have better health. I want to be more fit and be faster and stronger. So I think you can translate that to any kind of change, any kind of thing that you're trying to improve at. Your intention might change with time, and you might not be aware of it in the beginning, and it will be more clear as you gain more self-awareness and you get to know yourself more.
I think the reason I like to differentiate between starting and sustainability, in the sense of like, I feel like a lot of people could start with a specific action in their life, not necessarily for the wrong reason, but they could use some external motivation or external reason or external why to get started. But I feel like at some point, if you want to make what you're doing more sustainable and more consistent, you need to find a reason why you're doing this.
I think I'm confident that the reason has to be intrinsic for it to be sustainable and consistent, because external reason might fade away, they might change, you know, depends on your environment, where you are, but intrinsic reasons, they will always remain the same. You know, like, you know yourself, you know your intentions, you know what you want, and that's not going to change. You know what I mean? But if your reasons are external, like your friend circle or the place that you live in, then that might change, you know? So, yeah, so I would say that sustainability is related to what kind of intentions you have, you know, and what kind of questions are you asking. But I also would add that if you want to implement change, it's very important to ask why, that's for sure. So going back to your first point.
You need to have that sort of connection of where you want to go and why you want to go there. Because like at the end of the day, there's like an unlimited amount of options that you can take, or places that you can decide to go to or become. Once you've decided on a specific one, you have to know why you've chosen that, and exactly like you said, intrinsic motivations or intrinsic intentions. For me, that stands for alignments with who you want to be. So when you have your internal or your intrinsic intentions and motivation, you know that you're going that direction for this specific reason, and then you've got your list of why. Looking at this from another perspective is because I feel like a lot of people could start implementing change in a certain area in their life or doing something different. And like we said at the start, you could have a different reason to why you're starting. And then at some point you can have to, quote unquote, update your why. Yeah. You need to update your reason why, because starting could be, like we said, like you can start with an external motivation. And at some point you need to figure out why you're doing this, so you avoid getting burnt out due to either misalignment issues or external motivations that just disappear.
Yeah. Like that's why it's not sustainable, you know, but absolutely. In the beginning, I think your intentions matter less, because what matter is doing the thing, you know, like trying to do things, changing your life. So it doesn't matter what your intentions are, but when you want to have more consistency, you want to actually take the next step, and it has to be sustainable. And for that, you need intrinsic motivations. I think in the start, you can get away with many things that maybe are not aligning with who you are, as long as you are doing something. You know what I mean? Like, one thing will lead you to the next, and then at some point you're gonna know yourself more. You're gonna know exactly what you want, the goals that you're trying to achieve, your values, and that's where you start to find the balance in everything. That's also why, for example, self-help books can be really beneficial and important in the beginning. It's even good to maybe follow them with each step if you don't know anything about self-improvement, but at some point you need to find more balance. Once you know yourself more, you need to figure out better intentions, better motivations, and what you actually want.
You need, I feel like, which actually, this brings me to my next point, which is, like last time I brought up the example of when you're starting to implement change or learn a new skill or do something. It's like you're climbing up the ladder, and I'm just gonna put it like this: like the ladder is endless and limited, and if you're just climbing and you're not pausing just to look how far you've come, and just keep on climbing, at some point you're not gonna be able to keep on going. And I connect that to change in the sense of, if you don't pause every now and then and reevaluate where you are, how far you've come, why you're doing what you're doing, and what are the next steps. I feel like if you don't do that well, and a lot of people don't do this, to be honest. Even I'm not that good. I'm not doing that well in that regard. I still try to do it more often than not. But at the same time, it's like, once you got started with a specific reason and you just went a specific distance with that motivation, and you've learned what you've learned so far, I feel like at some point you've got to stop, update the reason, and check what you've learned so far and what have worked so far for you, and see how to go from this point to the next level.
You need to look back and reflect, because if you don't do that, you won't really know how much are you improving in the first place. You know, like, if you're going forward, which is a good thing, but if you keep going forward without looking back, you're just like, okay, you know, you are doing things, but where are you in this journey? What is working for you? What is not working? What can you improve? What can you reflect on? What can you change and get rid of? You know, that's why it's really important to take breaks as well in your self-improvement journey. Whatever you're trying to do, your productivity is really good, but if you don't take breaks to hang out with your friends or do things that you really enjoy without the context of profession or the future or money, then you're bound to get burned out eventually, and also go astray. Maybe go on a path that you thought you wanted, but you never reflected, and then you get stuck, you get burned out, you're just not sure anymore. That's why I think taking breaks, reflecting, looking back, looking down when you're climbing the ladder is very important.
For sure. But that leaves in, I feel like it's an open-ended question, which is, when is the right time to take the break or take that step back? Because even for me so far, I don't know when the right time is. I don't even know if there is such a thing as right time.
I don't think these are things that you can measure. That's a problem with, like, that's the issue. I don't know if it's not an issue, but like, when it comes to evaluating your values and the things you care about, there are no numbers that you can measure. You know, I heard it somewhere, but it really spoke to me, because we always try to put things in boxes and numbers and evaluating percentages. You know, that's why we like statistics and all of this. But you can't do that when it comes to your relationships, to your values, the things that you care about, the things that are related to your emotions.
There's not enough metrics or data.
There's not. So it's about trial and error. You try things. Okay, I'm gonna take a break now. I will see how I feel about it. Maybe it was not the right time to take a break. Maybe it will break your mentor. But so what? You're gonna fail for a little bit and then you go back.
Okay, you know? For that regard, I feel like you need to have.
It's difficult. Like, I struggle with that a lot as well. It's like, I know how the thing works, but I'm still a human, and I also struggle to decide, when do I take break? Is it the right time now, or am I slacking? You know,
in that regard, I feel like it's good to have, we've talked about this before, a stack of undeniable proof. And that stands, for me personally at least, a stack of undeniable proof means that I've done this before, I've been through this before, I've found out how to do this before, and I've taken breaks or went astray and still managed to come back to the path that I want in my life. And once you take a step back every now and then, and you just look at the things that you've done, and then you tag this proofs of, I've been here, I've done this, this and that, this and that, and then you've got this tag that, for me personally at least, and I think it also is a little bit of consulting for a lot of people to know that you can look backwards and use that as a bridge to get you through the harsh phase or the fear of taking a step back.
Yeah.
You can use that bridge to, it allows you to take that step backwards while knowing that you've done this before and you're doing this right now, and you can actually continue after taking the step backwards. Like, if you're afraid that if you take the break and you're afraid that after that break, or and it's not necessarily a break, just like, I feel like just a step backwards to reevaluate. And if you're afraid of what the outcome is going to be from this action, and you've got the stack, you've got to prove that before in the past you've done this reevaluation phase and you still managed to go back on track, then you can use that as a motivation to actually take the step backwards and reevaluate.
But I would say this is something that becomes much easier when you're further in your self-improvement journey. Like if you are still in the beginning of the journey, you don't have that stack of proof. There is nothing that you can compare with, from your own experience, from your own journey. So the first time you try to take a break, you're gonna directly think that you're just going back to square one, that everything you're doing is wasted. I mean, I would say I am further ahead in my self-improvement journey, but I still struggle with these kind of thoughts. I don't go deep in them and get stuck. Like, oh, everything I've done was a waste. I didn't do anything right. Now I'm back to square one. I get some thoughts, but they're just thoughts. But if you're just starting, it can be real. You might even quit all of the things that you're trying to do because you think you are not improving.
How do you deal with these thoughts though, especially at the start? What worked for you?
What worked for me is meditation. Just the fact that I learned that my thoughts are just thoughts and they are not the real world, because before I would take my thoughts as a real thing. Like whatever I am thinking, it is a fact. It is the world. This person hates me. I am not good at this. I'm going to be a failure. All of this kind of negative thought loops. I get dragged with them, but once you try to meditate and understand how thoughts work, and I think it is one of the biggest things that helped me in my self-improvement journey, especially in the beginning, to, push through the hardships, push through the difficult parts and the frustrations when I was trying to improve at a skill or, improving myself in general, gaining more self-confidence and becoming a more productive person and a better individual overall.
Meditation definitely tells you a lot. I feel like it's also necessary that you learn to detach yourself from your thoughts, in the sense of, this is something that I try to do also through meditation, and it has helped me a lot, which is, I'm going to look at myself as an individual with my thoughts that are just circling around in my brain or just going through my brain. And I'm going to always try to detach myself from this and have like a third person perspective view upon myself with my thoughts. So I can have this detachment from my thoughts and how they're affecting me, so I can know or try to find a way how to deal with that. But ultimately, I've realized that you just have to come to accept that the thoughts are gonna there. The thoughts are gonna be there. The thoughts are not gonna. And even if you learn to detach yourself from them, they're bound to come back every now and then. But at some point, once you've put in, of course, the more work, the merrier. But at some point, I guess you get to a level or a point in your life where even when you get the thought, you can still get started with the thing. One of the quotes that I use as motivation in that regard is, you jump in exactly when it feels scary to jump in. So when I want to do something and I start getting these negative thoughts that are like, oh, what if not? What will be? What was? My first reaction is like, nope, we're gonna stop thinking and we're just gonna do what we're gonna do.
Just do the thing.
So, like for example, waking up in the morning and say you want to go to the gym, and you're gonna start thinking, do I want to eat first? I want to go to the gym. Do I want to grab coffee first? Once you start thinking, you get stuck in this loop of thoughts. It might be harder to get out.
I think Arnold Schwarzenegger have talked a lot about about this thing, like how your thoughts, especially when you wake up, you should just not think.
Exactly.
Whatever thoughts you're having, just ignore them and go do the first thing that you want to do, whether it's a shower or going to the gym or eating. Just do the thing. Don't overthink it. Once you start thinking, that's where the procrastination is going to happen and you're going to start wasting time in between. But if the first thing you do after you wake up is doing something that is, let's say, hard, then your day is bound to continue in that way, in a more productive manner, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. So like I said, what I've learned or what I've been trying to implement in my life is when you wake up, or not necessarily when you wake up, even throughout the day, when you want to do something, just go ahead and do it. The more you think about it, the more you're going to doing something else. Let it be literally anything from starting a new skill to just sitting around playing video games. The more you think about when, how, and why, the higher the chances are that you're going to end up procrastinating on it. So, for example, what I've learned is if it's a day where we're supposed to start to record an episode, for example, I'm just going to record the episode. I'm not going to be like, wait, let me eat first, let me do this first, let me do that first. And then at some point, it's
all of that is procrastination in a sense,
Exactly. So just like, don't entertain the thoughts you have. I think how many thoughts do we have on average on daily basis?
I don't know, but
between
it's
60
a lot.
and 80,000.
It's a lot.
60 or 6 and 8,000, something like this. And when you think about that number, it's actually insane. The amount of thoughts that you have every day. And if you're gonna go entertain every and each thought that you get,
and you're not gonna do anything.
It's not that you're not gonna get anything. You're just gonna be split into millions of pieces, and you're just gonna end up destroying yourself.
And the problem is, I think this whole thing goes back to being self-aware. When you are more self-aware, when you have more self-awareness, then you realize that your thoughts are not necessarily who you are. Whatever kind of thought you're getting. I think I've talked about this in a previous episode that, it could be something that you got from your childhood or something you saw on TV, something you got influenced by. Your thoughts are not who you are, but if you don't have enough self-awareness, you get really attached to a certain thought and you think it is your reality, and that is going to take you in some certain direction. But once you have more self-awareness, you know what you're doing, you have better intentions, then you're bound to be on a more straight path, because you know where you are going, you know which thoughts you want to entertain and when do you want to entertain them. And any noise that is coming from left or right, you're just going to ignore. They are there, they're going to sit there. That's the thing. They're never going to go away. The anxiety, the anger, the frustration, the nasty part of you, whatever kind of thing that we are very complex beings, and whether you have anxiety, whether you have nasty thoughts, whether you have anger issues, even if you work on these things, you can't get rid of them completely. You're just putting them more in the background and focusing on the things that you care about. That's how I see it. And that's how you can control your thoughts, in a sense.
I look at it like the higher your self-awareness is and the more that you're aligned with who you want to be, the stronger the filter is in your brain.
Sure, yeah.
The filter here stands for when the thought is entering your brain or your awareness, the filter is going to be like, okay, this is not something that we want. So just can instantly send it to the backwards more and give you sort of a perspective on, or gives you the opportunity, I guess, to be clear, gives you the opportunity to be able to have a little bit of distance from your thoughts. Because once the filter sends the thought to the back of your brain, you're not going to be affected by it, and you're just going to hear it really far noise. And that's going to give you a little bit more of time to think whether you want to entertain that thought or whether you're just going to let it pass by without giving it any power.
Sure.
And then the filter also helps you get, it kind of allows only the thoughts. Okay, for the most part, it allows only the thoughts that you want or that aligns with who you are through. And then you can also choose from a little bit less amount of thoughts which ones you want to give the power to for this day that will take you to a place that you want to go.
But let's also remember something, that no matter how often you do this and how better you get in meditation and how much self-awareness you have, there are going to be moments and maybe hours where you just can't do that.
For sure.
The thoughts that you don't want are going to come and you're going to entertain them whether you like it or not. It's just about how often do you go back to the present? How often do you go back to the things that you're trying to do? You know, it's the same when you meditate. Even, let's say, the best meditators, they also get distracted by thoughts. They also get distracted by things, and then they bring their attention back to the present.
Exactly.
And it's just about how often can you do that? How long does it take you? We talked about this as well before. How long does it take you to get out of the rut that you're in, the hardship that is causing you an emotional struggle? It's all about how often can you do this? How much time do you spend in the things that are standing in your way? You know, how long does it take you to get rid of them? And they're going to come back and you get rid of them again. So it's just the human way of living. It's not something to fix. It's just something to improve, I would say. People tend to say when someone have a lot of anxiety or a lot of depression and they're not focusing on their life, that maybe something is broken in them. But this is just not true. You know, it's just
Exactly. I don't
they
think
have something to improve.
I don't know if it's something that we can call broken or something to fix. It's like, I feel like there's some traumas that you can't actually get over that you just learn to live with. Just like there's hardships that you just have to get used to and know how to cross over them.
I think
Just like anxiety, for example, or fear or stuff. Like, doesn't matter how good or how far you come. I think there's always a chance that of them coming back and attacking you, and it's just about knowing how to defend yourself and how to build up better walls around you. That when these attacks come, be able to survive it. I don't know if it's about fixing or even improving, because I feel like some things that it just can remain there.
Yeah, I would say it's also, I don't like the term getting over, because for me it's more about seeing your experiences in a different perspective, you know, to improve the stories that you're telling yourself. And the stories are still there. What happened is still there. You're never going to get over it. It's still part of you. Someone died, something really bad happened. You're never going to get over that. You're never going to forget that. But you can change the stories you're telling yourself. You can try to improve how you view these things, I guess. And that's what can help you become more healthy in your mind, you know? That's how I see it nowadays. That's just something that I have realized, and it just made sense for me.
There's some truth to that. It's I feel like it's also related to a little bit of maybe acceptance of how things are and how things are bound to be, whether it's the unfairness in the war or related to our human biology and how evolution made us to be.
We have to live with things.
Once you've come to accept a lot of things, I think like that's the paradox in my opinion, that once you've come to accept how things are and how tough things are, that's how you end up making them easier.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just by trying to be better at it, just by accepting the fact that, okay, like this is life. Life is not going to be that easy.
Life is not fair.
Life is not fair. These are my genes. This is the way that I was born. These are the traits of the human evolution. This is the human instinct, this and that. And once you've come to accept a lot of things, I feel like it just makes things easier, just opens you up to more
opportunities.
Not necessarily opportunity, but it opens you up to more experience, I guess. So like you're willing to do something or try something new, even though under normal circumstances you wouldn't. But just because you've accepted how things are, just like, okay, you know what, let's go ahead and try this or that.
Yeah, it's like, let's say someone have wasted so many years in his life. Maybe he's in the start of his 30s or even at the start of his 30s, and he just regrets all the time he wasted. And when you want to start with the self-improvement journey, he's gonna be really discouraged because he would think it is too late. But if you accept that that time is over, you've wasted a lot of time, you've made a lot of bad decisions, maybe you were even a bad person to other people. You just accept that, and you see that you can move on now. You have this moment to make the change. It starts with acceptance to become more confident of the things that you want to do to change. But if you are not accepting that, if you still feel guilty and shameful, then you're not going to be motivated to do anything about it. You know, like you're not changing the story, you're not changing the narrative. And if you forgive yourself, if you accept what happened, that's when you can start another chapter, you know.
That's related to self-acceptance and knowing that you didn't know better at the time. I would say that's maybe you've tried the best for what you could at that time as well. And it's also related to being a bit more vulnerable because technically if you're gonna accept the fact that there's time that you've wasted or there's things that you've done wrong, it's admitting that you are imperfect and that you've done so many wrongs or you've wasted so much time.
And that's how self-awareness starts.
Exactly, but at the same time, it's admitting that part is probably really hard for a lot of people. And
Absolutely.
I feel like the longer time that you wait before admitting something, the harder it becomes.
It becomes more difficult. Like, sure,
Exactly.
Even change, it gets harder the older you are, but it's never impossible, you know. It's just that if you haven't been self-aware for 40 years of your life, it's going to be difficult to start
Exactly.
then. But there is always a way, I would say. And I guess my advice would be to anyone who is starting, whether he's been wasting 40 years of your life, 50 years, 20 years, is just to accept your past, focus on self-awareness, meditate more in your life. I think these things are like what can initiate everything else, you know, to start on the self-improvement journey, but also stay on it and not give up, you know, and go back to the way that you're living because it was the thing that you are used to. So I would say let's end it here. Yeah, so see you in the next episode.